Charlie a lot better than me. But there is only one person I think can put this in perspective for us, and it's Victor Davis Hanson. Victor, of course, classicist, historian extraordinaire with Stanford. He is the author of so many wonderful books, including most recently, The End of Everything. And I had been listening to The End of Everything for about 3 weeks. And last night, as I flew from the West Coast to the East Coast, I listened again to the beginning and the end and a little bit about the Aztecs, because I was just trying to get my mind off of Charlie. Victor, welcome. Thank you for joining me. I do want to talk about The End of Everything, but I'd like to begin with your reflections on the significance of an assassination of a young political rising star.
Well, I don't like the word irreplaceable, but it applies to him. I can't think of anybody under the age of 40, either conservative or liberal, that had such a multiplicity of talent. He was an administrator. He created a huge, enormous organization from nothing. He was very instrumental in the 2024 victory of Trump by his massive voter registration of young people. If you look at the statistics compared to 2020 versus 2024, Trump in the key states made sizable gains in the youth vote. He could write, he had a podcast, he spoke very easily, extemporaneously. I don't know anybody in the world with 1 year of college who would wade in to debate at Oxford and Cambridge and do so well. So he was just an unusual person, and it's not going, I don't think anybody on the conservative side could ever approach that level of talent and effect and influence. So it's going to be, and I think that was the aim of the assassin. The assassin grasped that.
We are going to find out more about the killer in the next days. I'm sure now that we have a picture and a gun, they will capture him unless he takes his own life. And I know what was written on the casings. I'm not going to speculate, but it's an assassination. And you and I, Victor, can remember Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King, George Wallace being shot, I think in the 72 election campaign, a couple of shots taken at President Ford, and then of course Butler. But this is one like Robert Kennedy's that worked on a younger figure in the political arena. What impact does it have on our country beyond sorrow?
Well, because Charles Kirk was both a political activist, but he was also in the media, in his podcasts, his interviews, his columns. So we don't really see that too often in the United States. We see it in Europe and Latin America, Mexico, where groups will go after journalists or media prominent. I mean, we have people who have been killed that were journalists, but not that prominent. And so this is sort of, I don't know what you would call it, you crossing the Rubicon, because it's sending a message that there's everyone on the conservative side is fair game. And the reaction of some people on the left, at least the initial reaction, I don't know if they've subdued their emotions, but it shows that they're not unhappy. And we saw the same type of illness after Luigi Mangione, where he was considered a folk hero for killing Brian Thompson. And the same thing happened after Trump. The same things happened with threats to Elon Musk. So I think this is the beginning of something very dangerous, because I think people on the left, if this person turns out to be the left, will feel that this is a legitimate way to achieve political power that they lack right now. They don't have any political power in the House, the presidency, the top courts, and they're 30-70 on the major issues, and there's a radicalized element that allows this to happen. And I think also very quickly, if you continue to call the President of the United States a fascist, or Hitler, as we see, or New Republic puts a cover story where he looks like Hitler with a mustache, or you have your House Minority Leader come with a baseball bat, or you have kickboxing videos of House representatives are going to fight, and it's all fight in the streets and what you see at ICE, then that filters down to people, and it brings people out of the woodwork who otherwise would stay there. And I think we've created a climate where it's considered that some people in the left feel they're morally superior, they're intellectually superior, they're part of a stratum that is superior, and they feel that any means necessary or justified for their noble ends. And that's a very dangerous thing to do. If you have
Victor, yesterday I spent an hour with Justice Amy Coney Barrett talking with her about her new book, Listening to the Law. And we did not talk about specifically the portion of her book that dealt with what justices have to deal with now. The Kavanaugh near assassination, the daily protests, the leaks from the court. We didn't talk about that. I'll talk with her about it when I interview her on air next week, and I'll play the tape of that. But it seems to me the new normal was her security detail was extensive. We were inside of the Nixon Library. You've been there at Yorba Linda. You know, very secure. She'd done the Reagan Library the night before. Very secure. Do you think we're going to end there an era where people just don't do events in the open air anymore?
I don't know, but when you mentioned Supreme Court, and I was referencing mainstream politicians lowering the bar. I remember Chuck Schumer got out in front of the court while it was in session at a throng of anti-pro-life protesters, and then he yelled out by name Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and said they had reaped the wind and they were going to sow the whirlwind, and they were, quote, you're not going to know what's going to hit you. And then a few months later, we started to see this very scary phenomenon of people assembling at the homes of justices, and one was a potential assassin. As you know, he was talked out of it by his sister. So, yeah, I think that justices in general, but when you look at the Scalise and you look at the two Jewish Americans that were killed in Washington, that the attack on the Scalise and some of the Republican leadership, and the two against Trump. Even Josh Shapiro's, that attack on his home, that person was a radical pro-Palestinian. I get a little bit irritated, when everybody just says this is just a climate of violence. I'm not trying to excuse there are people on the right that have employed violence, but in this particular time, in this particular moment, it's mostly people on the left that justify it, and they tend to be unapologetic about it. They just come.
Well, we have in the law we have a phrase, excited exclamation, which is sometimes admitted into trial if you're making an utterance in the moment of excitement, it's considered probative. I saw the TMZ video yesterday. It's not dispositive for me, but it sounded like people were cheering. I read Blue Sky on the airplane for a couple of hours last night, and I'm amazed at how evil people are or how sick. So this brings me to the moment we're in. We've talked about President Obama ushering in a revolutionary period in American politics. Donald Trump being the counter-revolution, the attempt to start the counter-revolution through lawfare, the continuation of the counter-revolution. What's this? Is this what the Grokkai being murdered by, they were tribunes of the people, Charlie was really a tribune of the people. Is that this?
Yeah, I think because we are in a counter-revolution and we're questioning everything, such as the transgendered idea that it's a normalized third sex, or the DEI that your superficial appearance is essential rather than incidental to who you are. The Green New Deal has lost traction. I think people on the left feel that top-down revolution that was not shared by the majority of the people is now in danger. And it's not just in danger, there's millions of jobs that are in danger, careers, reputations that are in danger, and they feel that they can eliminate key people in that counter-revolution, whether it's Donald Trump or Elon Musk or Charlie Kirk, and I think there will be other threats to other people. Even lowly people like myself, I mean, I live out in the country, but I had my home swatted where somebody said there was an armed intruder, and an armed sheriff showed up. There was nobody here, of course. I went to the local bank that I've known my entire life, and I found that my entire savings and checking had been hacked and completely drained. I asked if it had happened to anybody there in the bank. No. So, I think that all the people on the conservative side that are somewhat outspoken are going to be questioned, and I think it's going to continue. I really do, because I don't see people on the left, by and large, apologizing for it or saying that it was completely wrong. Even when the MSNBC analyst was fired. If you look at that exchange, Katie Tour, the host, really prompted his response, Matthew Dow, because she was the one that the first thing she said in the segment was that Charlie Kirk was a divisive person. It's a conditional sentence. If he was divisive, then you can fill in the blanks, and the blanks would be the obvious implication that he deserved what he got. And basically,
it's interesting about Katie. He's not divisive. He's an actor in politics. He would go onto campuses and engage with young people, and they would do prove me wrong moments that made for great videos, viral moments. He would give ground occasionally, and he always ended with a smile and a handshake. Charlie was actually joyful. I don't know that this won't darken a generation. Do you think it will?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a force multiplier. I mean, we're talking on 9/11, and then we had Irania Zaratustra, who was murdered, not just murdered, but in her death throes and bewilderment, facing death and eternity. The guy walks by dripping blood, and I listened to the video very carefully, and I could hear twice, maybe I'm mistaken, if so, correct me, that he said, "Got the white girl," twice. Then the three people across the aisle got up, watched her die, and didn't even lend a finger. And there it was all, then the mayor's reaction, and then the circumstances of why DeCarlo's drawn her out. It was just overwhelmingly the worst. It was sort of the culmination of left-wing ideology in so many things. It reminded me of the less toxic but also lethal Palisades fire, just a train wreck of leftist ideologies all coming at once to destroy this poor girl's life. And then no one really saying publicly, why don't you cover this? Why are you suppressing this? Why are you suffocating the story? Why didn't these people help? What was going through his mind? Why was he out as a 14-year film? That type of thing. And then we have Charles Kirk, and I think those events, and there was a murder in Auburn as well by a felon who shouldn't have been out. I think it's just overwhelming to people, and I think whatever's going on, enough is enough. And the best thing I think for and I had just done Charlie's show in late August and had a long talk with him. You're absolutely right, and I'd been out, to Phoenix and spent a couple of days with him, and in the past he wasn't a divisive figure. He always wanted to encounter people and see if he could persuade them. And the statistics show in the 2024 election they made sizable gains in the swing states because of those efforts, along with voter registration. But I think people they're kind of bewildered, but they do have an idea that enough is enough, and the best thing they could do is register in enormous numbers in November and do something historic and not lose the midterms as most presidents do after 2 years, win them by decisive margin. That was something he was really interested in.
Let me ask you, Victor, about autodidacts. I met Charlie when he was 18 or 19, as I said. He didn't know a lot, but he had a lot of enthusiasm. And he would call and compliment me on Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Arnn. He couldn't get enough. Autodidacts are often driven to learn more and more and more, and he participated in all the Hillsdale courses. I'm sure he participated with you in that. And he was on a trajectory. I don't know if it was political or not. I don't know that he had ambition for himself. He certainly could have had any job in the White House that he wanted. The president liked him that much. He didn't want anything. He wanted to build his movement. But are autodidacts unique in your experience in terms of their hunger for knowledge?
Well, in the field that classical philology and classics in general, it's ironic that you asked me that question, because the three great achievements in the last 150 years were all autodidacts. We had Heinrich Schliemann, and of course he made the argument that it was a historic Troy, and Mycenae. He was a German banker. And then we had Michael Ventris. He was an architect that had cryptology experience in World War II, and he proved that Linear B was Greek, and the Mycenaeans were not non-Greek speakers or Semitic people. They were Greeks. Everybody that were classics were PhDs and formidable scholars, had not been able to decipher it. And then in some ways there was Milman Perry had a degree in classics, but he was a maverick, and he went out and lived in Serbo-Croatia, and he proved that Homer did not write the Iliad or the Odyssey, that it was a product of oral composition, which exists today in Serbia and the Balkans. So I've always been very sympathetic to autodidacts, but I will say this, and maybe controversial very quickly, I'm more sympathetic now than I was even 20 years ago or 30 years ago, because something's happened to the humanities in the university where the people who are trained are not trained well. In my field, they do not know Latin and Greek in the way that we were trained. They don't know classical scholarship. They're theorists. Theory in the humanities has become an excuse not to learn the discipline. So an English PhD will not know Milton. They will not know Shakespeare's play. They won't know Ben Jonson. They'll just read contemporary theory. They're not well educated. So I think the decline of the university, at least in the humanities, makes the autodidact in some ways more important than ever.
That's why I think the Hillsdale courses online matter so much to America, and millions of people are taking it. Victor, I want to transfer now from the tragedy of Charlie's death and the circumstances of what it says about the counter-revolution and the revolution to your book,